In this video folks, campervan or motorhome? So in this video folks, we thought we'd share our experiences that we had with our campervan and list the benefits of owning a campervan, but then get to the reasons why we chose a motorhome. So I guess you could say it's a bit of a comparison between whether to buy a campervan or a motorhome. So we're joined today by my good lady wife, Fran.
Hi.
Hi. Now before we go any further, a little challenge. At the end of the video, I'm going to explain or show what this is. But I want to see whether you can work it out before the end of the video. All I will say for now is, when we purchased our Roller Team motorhome, it came with a bag of bits. Not the bag of bits that they forgot to fit to the van, but the bag contained quite a number of things, including a wiring harness that obviously comes off the base vehicle when they convert it to a motorhome. Well, in this bag of bits was one of these. Unfortunately, I put it in a safe place, and it's so safe I can't find it. So I've had to pay just under £6 for a replacement, but what it is we'll see at the end of the video. Just one more thing to mention. For those that can see the description below the video, you'll find that we've listed the little sections that we're going to discuss into little chapters, so it will let you jump to whichever particular thing you're most interested in if you so wish. So we'll start with the campervan, because that was the first vehicle of course that we had for touring, going on holiday with. So what are some of the benefits of having a campervan? Well, the first major benefit in my mind, particularly for us because we don't have space at the front of the house for our motorhome, is that the campervan could stay parked at home. Now for me, it was quite fussy. That meant I could spend as much time as I wanted polishing the van. It meant it was always there so that we could get it prepared to go away on holiday. And just as important, if not more important, it didn't cost us anything in storage. So of course the motorhome is parked at a secure storage site. It's only about 15 minutes from where we live, but it costs about £400 a year. So of course we weren't having to find £400 a year when we had the campervan. So that's one plus for the campervan immediately if you're a bit restricted on parking at home. Yeah. So second benefit of course for a campervan folks is it can be used as a daily vehicle. Doesn't really occupy any more of a footprint on the road than a car, or a large family car anyway. It fits into car parking bays easily. It's just a very easy vehicle to manoeuvre. Obviously with a motorhome, this particular motorhome, although it's a modest 6-metre motorhome, is over a metre longer than the Transporter. The Transporter was 4.9 metres long in short wheelbase, which was the one that we had, and the long wheelbase I believe is 5.3 metres long, but both of those you'll find are quite easy to fit really into a car parking bay, certainly in the UK at least. Now the third thing that we really did enjoy with the campervan, and I personally miss, I don't know about yourself, is the whole VW scene that comes with the campervan. So not long after we bought our Transporter, we went to something called Busfest, which is in a lovely part of the UK called Malvern. It was a fantastic day. We did a long video on that. I'll put a link in the description for that video below. It was a gorgeous sunny day. The whole family enjoyed it. Full of VW fanatics basically, and full of customised vans. There are a lot of different trips you can do with a campervan, such as Busfest, and there's another one, what's it called?
Dubfries. Camper Jam. And
Camper Jam, thank you. So we didn't get to those two yet.
No.
We're still considering going, even though we've got the motorhome, but we won't tell anybody if you don't tell anybody. The fourth thing, I guess, is purchase cost. Now, of course, we all have a budget, and you can purchase a campervan and a motorhome for £10,000 or less. But like most things in life, of course, the more you spend, hopefully the better the vehicle, or certainly the newer the vehicle will be. And typically a campervan will be a little less on the purchase price than a motorhome. Although to be quite honest, with the Transporter, ours was, I think, quite a modestly priced brand new motorhome made by or converted by Camper King. But of course you've got VW's own product, which is called
California.
Yeah, I'd forgotten. Which is called the California, and they're retailing at near £60,000 and upwards. And there are other conversion companies that also charge £55,000-60,000, and we've seen them even more than £60,000. So they can be of equal price or even more than the motorhome. Of course, it depends what vehicle that you're looking at. But in general terms, it's safe to say that the Campervan, it's a smaller vehicle than the motorhome, is going to be a little less in cost to purchase than buying a motorhome. In case you're wondering, we have planned this and we have listed the things that we're going to discuss just in case we miss anything. So the next thing is insurance costs. Now it's a bit boring, but ultimately we all have to insure our vehicles, and if you think of the value that we've got tied up in them, we certainly do need to make sure that they have a decent level of cover. And again, for this, the Campervan is obviously going to cost a little less. We found personally for ours that the comparison between the van cost and the motorhome cost is roughly about £100 a year. Now when you factor in all the other costs that come with van life, £100 doesn't sound a lot, but I always say to people every cost is incremental, so another £100 is still another £100 at the end of the day, and it's just something that you need to factor in when you're making that decision, campervan or motorhome. Are we doing okay?
We're doing okay.
Okay. My wife does speak, she does, honest.
Sometimes.
If you've seen our videos with the 2CV, I do ask Fran to help out with the work on the 2CV. And apparently she's very good with a screwdriver. Anyway, moving on. So we've already touched on this, but I'm going to repeat it anyway because it's written on my book, so I'm obliged to repeat it. The Campervan is easier to manoeuvre than a motorhome. Now, particularly in the UK, we have a lot of quite narrow country lanes. Quite a few have what's called passing places where you might end up having to reverse back into that passing place. And some of those passing places are a little bit on the tight side. They're not particularly long and they're not particularly wide. Now, obviously, with a transporter, pretty much the size of a Mondeo, it was quite easy to be able to reverse that into most passing places. Whereas the motorhome, of course, particularly if you've chose one or you're looking to have one that's 7 metres and larger or longer, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to manoeuvre. It's also a little bit wider. If I remember right, it's about 200mm wider. And the mirrors on our Ducato motorhome, they're quite large. They're both electric, so the main mirror and the blind spot mirror, and I'm guessing they're quite expensive. So whilst I don't want to damage anything anyway on the vehicle, I think it'll be easier to clip the mirror on the motorhome than it would be to clip it on the Campervan.
Definitely.
So it'll be a good test when we start using our motorhome in earnest very shortly. We'll see how we get on with it. So the next thing with Campervans, and I got really close to spending quite a bit of money with this, is the customisation. The VW scene is huge, as we've already said, with Busfest, etc. And the customisation is almost endless with vans. And of course, the beauty of customising your van is it's your personal stamp on your vehicle. It's to show that that vehicle is yours and it's how you want it to look. Now that's great, but of course that customisation comes at a cost. Now my poor long suffering wife put up with about 3 months of me trawling the internet, looking at various pictures of wheels, spoilers, stickers, lowering kits. You could even have air suspension that was about £6,000 to obviously sit the van on the floor when it's parked and just allow you to vary the height of the van. Lots of different things. And I would say it's no exaggeration that up until about the last 2 weeks before we went to put a deposit on this motorhome, I was about to spend roughly £2,500 with a company called T4 Life on wheels, spoilers. Was we going to have it lowered? No. I don't think we was we? No. But we were certainly going to have spoilers, wheels, and obviously with the bigger wheels needs bigger tyres. front balance or whatever, yeah, front splitter even.
That's it.
And we were going to spend, as I say, about £2,500. I'm sure the van would have looked lovely. It would have been our personal stamp. So many people do it with transporters, but ultimately that's something that is very much of a van conversion scene. What you don't tend to find are many motorhomes going down the road with big wheels and spoilers on them. So we're not about to do that to our roller team motorhome. So unlike many YouTubers, if any of you are watching this and you're thinking, are we going to do up our van, because obviously YouTubers just love to modify everything, we're not going to be modifying the van. If we can find something that benefits the van and us, of course, we'll consider it and we'll review it on the channel. But we're not about to put big wheels on our motorhome.
No.
Plus the potholes in the UK are absolutely horrendous. And of course the beauty of the wheels and tyres that we've got on the motorhome is that the tyre depth is just so large, it just about copes with even our roads that we've got over here. I need another sip of coffee. Next thing we found with our campervan is there's obviously less systems in the campervan, and of course less systems means less chance of things going wrong. Now what do I mean by less systems? The heater in our campervan was a simple Webasto diesel heater, and it was what we got with our Camper King van. Now to be honest, I'm a massive fan of the Webasto heater that we had. It was very simple to use. It was fueled by the actual diesel tank of the van. So really all you needed to make sure was that when you pulled up on site, you got diesel in the van. Now when it comes to the amount of diesel that it actually used, we didn't use it constantly, did we?
No.
But we were certainly using it for like 20-30 minute periods.
Oh yeah.
And for the 3 nights that we stayed away in Wales, which was at 2 degrees,
yeah,
I can honestly say by the time we started the van to come home, we couldn't see the difference on the needle on the dash. So we think it's very economical, and it's just so easy because it's not being fed off a separate system like gas, for instance. And also of course there's only a cold water system in the campervan, with a humble 20 litre water tank. So yes, that does limit you somewhat, but it also is a less complication. There's no water to heat, so there's no running hot water in the van. It's just a simple case of cold water in, cold water out.
Yep.
Next thing with the campervan that I think was definitely a benefit over the motorhome was day trips. Now this might be a little bit more specific because our motorhome is in a storage facility, and unfortunately this secure storage is not 24-hour access. So we can gain access to our motorhome at 7 in the morning, but we need to make sure that if we were coming back the same day, that we were back, parked up and out of the electric gates by 7:30, because the gate stops working after 7:30. So from a day trip point of view, what we found with the campervan is, partly because of the size of the van, but obviously more importantly because the van was parked at home, was it was very easy just to throw some bits in the van and go out for the day.
Absolutely.
Minimal planning, if any. Throw some water in the 20 litre water tank, throw the kids in, and we go.
Yeah.
So we do miss the fact that day trips were definitely easier in the campervan. And then the last thing I think we can think of is fuel consumption. Now, I've read a lot of posts on Facebook VW groups about fuel consumption and what people were getting from their vans. We chose the 102, so obviously the lowest PS engine at the time. I think there's a lower one now for the T6.1, but on the VW Transport T6 it was a 102 PS engine mated to a simple 5-speed gearbox. Now in all honesty, and I think I've said this on camera before, I wished in hindsight that I'd bought the 150 PS with VW's DSG gearbox. Why? Bit more power obviously, but not a stupid amount of power. A good balance, I guess, of performance and economy. And I just think that the bigger the vehicle, the more relaxing they are to drive, or I find personally, the more relaxing they are to drive if they're an automatic. And I think very early on, after buying the campervan, I kept looking at the automatic versions and wondering why I hadn't done it. Now there'll be a lot of people that will say to you that the 102 PS is underpowered. And yes, you've got to be aware that the vehicle's weight with the conversion is probably at least 2,300 kilos, if not more. And that's before you put any luggage or people into the van. Lugging that weight, of course, means that the performance is not going to be particularly fast. It's not going to be as quick as my RS Clio, for instance. But in all honesty, it never felt lacking.
No.
At 70 mile an hour in fifth gear, it was at roughly 2,500 revs, so the engine wasn't particularly revving fast. And we found it was fine. But yes, I accept that 150 PS would have given probably a better balance of power versus fuel economy. VW also did, or probably still do, a 204 PS, again with a DSG box. And of course that is even quicker still, but at the price of economy. Now, we found on a good run that we could probably get around 45 to the gallon. And I think 45 to the gallon on a campervan is extremely respectable. There's probably people watching this video that don't believe we got 45. We did. And there'll be others that will hopefully be watching thinking, well, we got 50. And I'm happy for you. I think it is quite easy to get 45 miles per gallon out of a 102 PS campervan.
Yeah.
Time for a coffee. So obviously, while we're talking fuel consumption, we're early days at the moment with the motorhome. If I was to put finger in the air, guess, I would estimate we're probably going to get between 25 and 35 miles to the gallon. But we shall do fill, empty, fill tests on the fuel consumption rather than rely on the trip computer. And we'll let you know how we get on. But effectively, you've got to remember that the motorhome weighs, without us in it, 2,921 kilos. And of course, although ours is a low line motorhome, it hasn't got one of those particularly high tops above the cab. You are effectively still driving a house down the motorway, and therefore the drag coefficient is about as good as a brick. So I fully expect that it's only going to be around 25 to 35 miles per gallon, even though our particular van has got a 9-speed automatic, which I absolutely love. I hope it proves to be reliable. And at motorway speeds, it's not even getting to 1,500 revs, so the engine is really not doing a lot at all. So I'm hoping that we can even top the 35 miles per gallon. We'll have to wait and see. Just for the record, my daughter Alice continually reminds me that she loved the campervan and she loved the fact that she could climb up onto the top roof bed. So
she misses going in and having a play in the pop top.
Yes, so we can never please everybody all the time. So, before we move on to the benefits of the motorhome, have you considered what this might be? I'll let you know at the end of the video. So, motorhome. We're in one. In fact, I used to start the van videos by saying being in the camper office.
Yes.
So we need to come up with a new name for this one. Don't want to call it camper office because it's not really a camper van, although people still do refer to motorhomes as van, of course, and our registration plate says van on it. But I'm open to suggestions, sensible suggestions in the comments below as to what we could call this office when we're doing these videos. Let me know in the comments. So first on our list of benefits for the motorhome, it's the size of the vehicle. As we've said already, the short wheelbase transporter is, I'm going to hazard a guess, and I haven't got this written down, honest, it's 4,904 mil long, so it's obviously under 5 meters long. And the long wheelbase is 5,304 mil long, so it's exactly 400 millimeters longer. But whichever van you choose, that's still more car sized than a motorhome, both in length and in width. And even with the height, now our van, without the big wheels that I wanted, was 2,050 mil high. And even before we purchased it, I was worried that we were going to be able to actually even have one, because would it fit through the garage? Not because we didn't know the height of the van or the garage, we knew both. But unfortunately our drive, if you may have seen it on other videos, is on a slope. And I couldn't legislate just how much that slope would affect the height of the van going in.
Yeah.
Camper King were very generous, and they actually allowed us to have a van for a day which we would have hired off them if we had to. And at the time we had the van, we thought we were going to be paying something towards. And I drove the van home and we tested it, and I was like a kid in the sweet shop when we found out that it fitted in the garage. I was very happy. And I was even more happy when we took the van back to Camper King and they said, don't worry about the cost. Yeah. You're ultimately buying a van. We're happy that it's worked out for you. And for that, I have to take my hat off, if I got one on, to say, well done, Camper King. It's a good thing that you do.
Yeah.
And the coffees were almost as good as my wife's, but not quite. But anyway, of course, the motorhome is bigger. So instead of 2,050mm high, our motorhome is just under 3 metres in height. And now we've got the added TV aerial fitted to the roof. It's just over 3 metres in height. And I've purchased a sticker from a company on eBay, and I'll put a link in the description for them actually below, which they custom print. They can put the design of the make of the motorhome, so ours is obviously roller team, and they can put the custom size of the measurements. So we've put that sticker on the inside of the sun visor.
Yep. To
make sure I try and remember that I'm driving something a little bit taller than the campervan. I don't want our low-line motorhome becoming an extremely low-line motorhome, because that wouldn't be funny.
No.
And it would be a very expensive
mistake.
Yeah, it would be. And the other thing we've noticed with the motorhome versus the campervan is just how much lighter it is in here. Now, our roller team T-line motorhome, do you know, I think we need to one day have a look and actually count the number of lights that are in here. But at a hazard of guess, there's probably at least 11, 12 or more lights in this van. It's awash with lights. But even without those lights, there are, of course, more windows in this van. Why are there more windows? Because obviously the campervan had windows down the sides. Well, the reality is, with the campervan, one of those windows were partly blocked because of the units that were fitted in it. Yep. And that's fine. You're achieving a lot in a 5 metre space, so I get it. It's not a criticism. However, all the windows in this van are or should I say, none of the windows in this van are obscured. None of them have privacy glass either, so that makes a bit more light coming in, or allows a bit more light coming in. There are also skylights in the roof of the van. And when we talk about skylights, that's the one thing, if you have a camper van with a pop-top roof and elevating bed system, you're not going to have glass or a clear roof. No. And if you don't have a clear roof, by definition, it's going to be quite a lot darker in the van. So we actually found, I don't think we're exaggerating, it was quite claustrophobic in the van. And it was nice to always be able to step out of the van because of that. Yeah. Whereas what we hope with the motorhome is, because we are literally flooded with natural light, and then when it goes dark, flooded with a number of internal lights, it feels less claustrophobic.
Those lights are strip lights, you've got touch lights, you've got normal lights. But we don't have reading lights, not yet.
No, there's no reading lights. Well, there are reading lights in the cab, I guess, but I know there are some. There's a good point though, because there are some motorhomes that have reading lights that are like adjustable, and for some reason they haven't fitted them here. But there are plenty of lights. Yeah. So you do feel less claustrophobic for sure.
And of course it's taller, so you're not hunched over all the time.
Yeah, I mean, when the pop-top roof is up in the camper van, as I've shown in the previous video, you can walk about in it. Now, I say walk about in it. Obviously, the space that you're walking around in is quite constrained, but you can walk, and you know, I'm 5'10" and I could walk around in it. But of course, if the kids were sleeping in bed, then that elevated section is down. And all of a sudden, of course, you are effectively in a van and you can no longer stand up in it. So again, yes, at night time, if the kids had gone to bed, it would definitely feel more claustrophobic. Now, in all fairness, we've purchased a shorter van, so for the kids to go to bed in this van, we would have to either have the elevating bed down, or they would have to be sleeping and we would be in the front of the cab. So I wouldn't say it's still a perfect setup, but the height otherwise in the motorhome is definitely much better. Yeah. And the width is much better. Now, the easy answer for that, of course, is when you buy a camper van, it's constrained by the size, the dimensions of the base van. However wide a transporter is however wide the space you've got to work with. Now, of course, as I've said in a previous video, a review video for this motorhome, I'll put a link for that in the description below. This van will have turned up at Roller Team as just a chassis cab, which effectively means you've got the cab at the front with the seats and a rolling chassis underneath. Because therefore it's coach built, the coach built habitation area can be wider, longer and higher, and it really does make a difference.
It does.
I forgot the biscuits.
Oh, damn.
So we think another benefit of the motorhome over the campervan, and we do have experience of course with the campervan, so we do feel that we're okay in saying this, is arriving on site. Now with a campervan, like with the motorhome, one of the obvious things you're probably going to do if you go into a service pitch, at least for electric, is you're going to connect to the electric hookup, and that's absolutely fine, and you're going to do that whether you're in the campervan or the motorhome, so there's no real difference there whatsoever. Where the difference comes is what else that you have to do, or we found that we needed to do. So the first obvious thing we wanted to do when we got on site, of course, is lift up that pop top. Let's get some more space in our campervan.
Yeah.
So that sounds easy, but there was a few things to do in our van. Number one, you have to obviously release the front straps, and on some conversions the straps at the back
as well.
Now yes, the California VW's own campervan has an electric roof, so that's obviously different. But if we stick with our Camper King one for now, we had to release the straps. And then, yes, it was a simple case of pushing, and then the struts take the strain, and the roof pops up. But then that roof is only really surrounded by a material that I guess you'd find on a tent. And that material, therefore, whilst it is pretty much almost waterproof, it's not very good at keeping any heat in.
No.
And ultimately, if you want it to last a long time, you want to protect it. So what we found was we had to have a pop top cover. So already when we pulled up on pitch, we plugged in the electric, we've had to do the pop top roof, and now we're fiddling about with they're relatively easy, but still a little fiddly, fitting, and it's a two-person job in my opinion to make it easier.
Absolutely.
Fitting the pop top
cover.
Yeah, fitting the pop top cover, the thermal insulation. It was a good piece of kit. I'll put a link in the description below to the company that we use. In fact, it will be for sale shortly because, of course, we no longer need it. If you're interested in purchasing it, let me know. Send me an email. My email address is always under the video. But anyway, we also then had to turn the seats around. Now, here comes the contentious issue that I found when we purchased the campervan, or when we were buying the campervan. Just when we were ordering the campervan, the van had actually got two single front seats, of which the passenger one would swivel round. So they were effectively captain's chairs, and they got two armrests on both. As a no-cost option, we chose to have the double seat, which is manufactured by Kira Vans, or they manufacture the base. Now the Kira Vans base is very clever insofar as it's allowing a double seat, a standard VW seat that was never designed to turn. But there's a bit of an art to get it to turn. It's not easy to get it to turn.
Not at all.
And there's 4 bolts that you have to fiddle around with to do it. And I'd say it takes a good 2 minutes or more. Probably longer than 2 minutes. So now, of course, we've got electric hookup, pop-top roof, pop-top insulation, and the swivel seats to do. And then finally, I guess, is the windscreen thermal...
Oh, the thermal covers.
Thermal covers. We had the internal ones. I think the internal ones are fine, but as people have commented on our previous videos, they are more prone to building up a bit of condensation. I agree, they are. We would, I'm sure, have purchased some external ones from a company called Rainbow Blinds, I think, had we kept the vehicle. And to be fair, yes, the campervan and the motorhome both need to have these put on. But I think what we're trying to say, but I'm taking too long to say it, I should have got the wife to explain this, is that when you pull up on site, there's a lot more fiddling around with the campervan. When we pull up with the motorhome, we could plug in the electric, throw the cover on the windscreen, and turn the 2 seats around. And you're literally there. Nothing else to do. And what's more important, and I couldn't stress this enough, folks. If you're new to van life, if you're considering having a camper van or a motorhome and you've never had one before, I think this is really important. I was naive, very happy to admit I was naive. One of the benefits I thought of having a camper van was you can turn up on site, stay there, camp out, do whatever. When you want to go and tour places, no problem, put the key in ignition, go. And it's just not like that. The reality is just not like that at all. It's so different. Why? Well, because you're not just disconnecting from the electric hookup. We had to faff to get the Campervan seat back round.
Yep.
You have to take the insulation off the pop-top cover. We would normally have bedding and pillowcases on the pop-top bed.
Yep.
So we would have to take those down because you can't put the pop-top roof down with anything on that pop-top bed other than maybe a blanket.
That's right.
You'd probably get away with a blanket. I wouldn't personally risk pillows or anything.
No.
So you'd have to strip all that area out. Then you'd have the faff of bringing the roof down, which there's a knack to it. It's fine. And there's a video I've made showing how to do it. And I did it on my own and filming. But it still takes time. And there's two straps. And you've got to make sure that the fabric is all tucked back in and that you're not trapping the fabric under the pop-top roof.
And the kids and the wife and everybody out the way.
Yeah, everybody else has to be out the way.
To do it.
Only after all that can you sit in that seat and turn the ignition and go and travel. Whereas the motorhome, we could literally disconnect the electric hookup, spin the seats around and go. So one of the benefits I thought of having a camper van proved not to be the case.
No.
The reality is, in my opinion, I think you'd agree.
Yeah.
I'm not cajoling us to agree. I'm kicking her under the table. It is definitely more awkward if you're going to plan on going touring. So what we found we did, and we'll probably do the same in fairness sometimes with a motorhome, is that we would leave the vehicle on site, set up in what I'd call camping mode rather than driving mode. I like that phrase. And we would then either walk to where we were going or we would get public transport. Now I appreciate at the moment, folks, with the virus, it's not recommended to be using public transport. But let's just pretend for a minute that the normal world will come back at some point in the future. We found it quite nice to be able to just walk rather than driving all the time. And or catch a train or a bus to go somewhere. We had a fantastic trip in Wales. And the camper van never moved once from the time we got there till the time that we left. But as I say, you need to consider the time it takes to go from camp mode to driving mode with a camper van. Another coffee. Have we got more coffee? Yeah. Would you be good enough? My good lady wife. I've just realised one of the benefits of Fran sitting that side. It means it's easier to get the drink. And if anyone's wondering, yes, we are in a motorhome. But for the benefit of simplicity today, we brought... You give me all the coffee. We brought a flask, which I know is a cop-out, but cheers anyway. I'll start before you're back. The next thing we want to discuss is insulation. Now again, this is quite a hot topic, if you pardon the pun. And I'm more than happy for people to put their thoughts and comments below this video. The Camper King van is not insulated. Shock. I also believe that VW Zone California has either either no or minimal insulation. But the number of people on forums and the number of converters that seem to have different opinions on whether you should have insulation or not, I'm going to say on the record now, it's personal choice. Our van was not insulated and we never had a problem. No. As we said earlier in the video, we had a holiday in Wales. Yes, it wasn't quite freezing at night, but it was definitely down to 2 degrees. We hadn't got the pop-top thermal cover at that point either. Yes, we used the Webasto diesel heater, but we only used it for about 20 minutes at a time. And then we used a little electric oil-filled heater that would just sort of keep the temperature just right. It would just sort of keep it sort of... Trying to find the word, and the word's
take the edge off.
Take the edge off, thank you. So it took the edge off, kept it sort of not too bad. We didn't have a problem. Now, my understanding is one of the reasons that Camper King say they don't use insulation is because the risk of building up moisture and damp between the interior panel and the exterior panels of the van.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you'll all have different opinions on how much of that would or wouldn't happen. But again, all I can say is what we've experienced. And I will go on record and say I didn't frankly care that it hadn't got insulation in our van. It made no difference to us whatsoever. If, however, you want insulation in your van, or you deliberately choose a company because it promotes the fact it's got insulation in the van, that's absolutely great. You pay your money, you take your choice. Had the Camper King van been insulated, I wasn't about to say to them, can you take the insulation out, please? All I'm saying is, we didn't find a problem whatsoever. It was absolutely fine. But with the motorhome, of course, it's completely different. And I'm going to have to refer to notes to see exactly what Roller Team describe it as. I found it. But I'm going to have a drink first. Is the suspense killing you? So our motorhome has something that Roller Team call VTR. Some of you will probably know what that is. I don't. Stroke styrofoam. I know what that is. Insulation. And this insulation is everywhere. So it's in the roof, it's in the side walls, and it's in the floor. So no, we have not spent a night in this motorhome yet, but I fully expect it to be quite easy to heat. It obviously has a different heating system to the Campervan. Okay. So our heater, of course, in the motorhome is different to the Campervan. It can run off the electric, and if you're on a campsite, the electric's probably been part of the bill for the campsite, so why not use their electric? Or it can run off the gas. And I think, although it's a larger space to heat, it's only a 6-metre motorhome. There's 4 people in it. I'm expecting it to be quite easy to heat with all the insulation that's in the vehicle. Does that make me a hypocrite because I've just said I didn't care that the Camper King van had no insulation? Not really. It just didn't bother us that it didn't have insulation. If it did, so be it. No problem either way. Take it or leave it.
Yeah.
So after insulation, it's probably a good time to talk about ventilation. Now, in the Camper King van, I think we noticed a couple of, or you noticed a couple of vents in the cupboards. The cupboards. Down, the lower down on the cupboards.
On the floor.
I never really noticed those, but I'm sure they're there.
They are.
But the only other way that you can gain ventilation in the camper van is to fit wind deflectors on the front doors.
Yeah.
Now, from a style point of view, they look quite nice. Some people fit them literally because they look quite nice. Ours were Van X. They were easy to fit, cheap enough.
Yep.
Didn't have any problems.
Nope.
Some people report that they can fly off, not the Van X ones, but any wind deflectors. You can find one flying down the motorway. We didn't have that, but of course, if your window's shut, it's pressed against it anyway, so it's not going to go anywhere when the window is shut. But we didn't have that problem. Why do you need the wind deflectors on the van? Having the wind deflectors mean that you could open the window about an inch or two, either side of the van, and you could leave them open all night.
Absolutely.
Without obviously fear of the rain coming in. And we found, even with the internal insulation screens that we got on the transporter, that there wasn't a lot of condensation. And bearing in mind there was 2 adults and 2 children in the van, I was quite impressed. Yeah. So the van did quite good as a van. However, the Roller Team motorhome that we sit in, like probably every motorhome that's built nowadays, is absolutely full of ventilation.
Everywhere.
It's got vents everywhere, including the garage, around the floors, in the ceiling, everywhere. So we don't expect to ever need to open the windows on the van and leave them open overnight. No. So we certainly won't be fitting wind deflectors on our motorhome. No. The next thing that was a big benefit for us for the motorhome, certainly for us, everyone has their own requirements, is the bathroom. In a 5-metre long transporter, unless you go for one of the new Grand Californias, which of course is much bigger and much more expensive, they don't have a bathroom. You can't have one, and that's absolutely understandable. It's a van. There is a limited amount of space to work with. But again, maybe naively, we purchased a porta potty for our camper van.
Never got used.
No, it never got used. It sat in the back of the van, which it was designed to do.
Absolutely.
But the one thing I had an issue with, I guess, with the porta potty was, where do you use it? Now, some of you may be watching this video and thinking, well, yeah, we have them and we use them and they're absolutely fine, and that's great. My view is there's only really a couple of options that you can use. There's only a couple of options really where you can use the porta potty. You're either going to place it in the middle of the van and politely ask everyone to leave while you do whatever it is that you need to do on the porta potty, or you have an awning. We did buy an awning for our van that we never got to use at the end, and is being sold as we speak. In fact, I think it has been sold as we speak. And then maybe use that, what I would call corridor, between the van and the main part of the awning, and place it in there. But for me, it's not ideal. I understand that that's the option that you would have because obviously it's a camper van, and we also understood and used the facilities when we were stopping at the campsites.
Absolutely.
And depending on where you stop, the facilities can be rather splendid, and where we've been so far, they were absolutely lovely. The problem for me is, if you're the type of person that gets up in the middle of the night and you want to go to the loo, as we call it in the UK, then for the camper van we found that meant that I would end up disturbing everyone, having to unlock and open the van and go to use the campsite facilities. Whereas in the motorhome, there's no unlocking of the van. I literally go to the bathroom, which is a lot more like going to the bathroom in the house. And the Thetford toilet has an electric flush, so apart from the fact that you have to empty it at some point, and I'm not looking forward to doing that, but we'll do a video on how that's done in a future video. It means we've got a bathroom.
Yes.
And the motorhome we chose, if you think, and I'm going to keep saying this, it's just under 6 meters long. We love the bathroom in our sub 6 meter motorhome because it hasn't got the shower over toilet.
No.
It literally has got the toilet, the basin, and a separate shower. And I think for a van this size, that's really impressive.
Absolutely.
Almost looking forward to using it just to see what it's like. Then the next one that might be a little contentious for some people, but you know, in for a penny, in for a pound, is comfort. Now, with the camper van that we chose, it had something called a rock and roll bed or an R&R bed. And when we looked at the van originally and got all excited, and I think sometimes if it's your first van, you maybe not necessarily thinking completely logically and maybe not really testing everything completely. You're sort of more excited by the prospect of having your first camper van. Anyway, when we went to look at the van that we ultimately purchased, we obviously sat on all the seats. We tested how it worked.
We played with the cupboards.
We poked and prodded everywhere.
Absolutely.
And we loved it, and we bought it, obviously. However, in our opinion, having used the vehicle quite a few times, the R&R bed is just plain uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
I'd rather sit on a wooden bench, in all honesty. I think if you took a cold hard look at an R&R bed, or particularly the base of the R&R bed, it doesn't actually even look comfortable. Now, your camper van doesn't have to have an R&R bed, and Camper King themselves do offer something called a rib bed, I believe it is, or RIB bed. Now, at least in look, they look a lot more comfortable. We never got to test one, so I'm not going to say on camera what we thought of it. But I would certainly encourage you, if you're looking to buy a camper van, to try both the R&R bed and the rib bed. Because personally, we thought the R&R bed was uncomfortable. Yes, it's an easy system. The rib bed, I'm not going to say it's more complicated, but there's a different operation that you do to make it into a bed. I don't particularly think it's any more difficult though. But it does look a lot more comfortable than what we sat on. I found that every half an hour, we were having to get out the van and stretch my legs. Because for want of a better word, my bum was numb. And I don't like a numb bum. Now, the kids, of course, were sitting on the double seat that's at the front. And something I forgot to mention about the Kia van seat, or I might have forgot to mention, I've forgotten whether I've mentioned it or not, is that the Kia van system means that it raises that seat up a bit.
Yes.
And I have read many comments on Facebook groups of people moaning that the seat's too high.
Yeah.
Now, at 5'10", I didn't find that a problem, but you are aware that you're sitting higher than the driver.
And getting out of the seat, actually, I felt I was slipping out of the seat rather than getting
slipping off the seat rather than getting off it.
Getting off it.
Or getting
Even
off the
holding
seat.
the handle was rather iffy.
So again, for us, seating wasn't ideal. Now obviously fast forward to the motorhome, it's coach built. The seats at the front are absolutely superb, really comfortable, and obviously they both turn around, whereas on our particular camper van only one of the seats, or the double seat, turned round. You couldn't turn the driver's seat round.
No.
I am aware that for some camper vans you can, or on some you can turn them partly round. It depends on where the units are installed. On these you can turn them round completely. The rest of the seats are a bench with a comfortable backrest, so I accept the fact that the bench is still a bench, but I have to say, so far we found them to be comfortable.
Actually, yeah.
And because there's more space and a bit more flexibility about where we all choose to sit, we could swap around.
Yeah.
We could effectively put the music on, everyone dance about, turn the music off, and we all end up sitting somewhere else.
Musical chairs.
Musical chairs. So next thing, of course, is cooking. Now in our Camper King van, we chose not to have the grill, didn't we? The oven and grill.
Yes, because that rattles like you wouldn't believe when you're going down the road.
The one that they kindly hired to us for free.
For free.
Rattled from the moment we left their forecourt till the moment we parked back on. Now I'm sure we could have sorted that out.
Oh yes.
In reality, I wasn't particularly bothered because I knew we weren't buying that van.
No.
But we also didn't think we would be using it much.
No.
So our Camper King van had a 2 gas hob.
Yeah.
And a sink with cold water, as we said. And that's absolutely fine. And we purchased a set of Ridge Monkeys. There's links in the description for everything we use in our camper van and what we use in our motorhome below. The Ridge Monkeys were fantastic.
Yes.
Very good piece of kit. And of course, we're able to bring them along with the motorhome. With the motorhome, of course, we've got a free gas hob burner, or 3 gas burners. A bit better sink, which of course got hot and water.
Hot and cold water.
Hot and water running, I was going to say.
Water and hot, cold and water running.
Yeah, hot, cold water running. And of course it has got what I'd call quite a conventional oven and grill setup.
Yeah.
To be quite honest, it wouldn't look out of place in our kitchen.
Nope.
So from a cooking perspective, as far as the equipment's concerned, that and the 141 litre fridge versus the 50 litre fridge in our Camper King van just gives us a bit more options with the cooking and storing of food and drink, which we like.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was quite confined, having to move the television so that you could get to the sink and the hob, and having to use the table and keep the children out of the way while you're trying to cook something in the camper van.
That's a good point. Yeah, you got to remember that depending on what van or motorhome you go for, we definitely found, and I know we've said musical chairs already in this video, but we definitely found that if you wanted to do anything in the kitchen bit of course was part of that square of habitation area that you can use in the camper van. So you would always have to manoeuvre and move stuff to use the sink or to use the gas hobs or to do anything. Basically you always had to move people around.
And boil the kettle if you wanted a bit of warm water to do your washing up.
Yeah, it's just anything that you wanted to do, you had to plan. So of course the difference in our motorhome is the kitchen, certainly in the one that we've chose, and I'm sure in most motorhomes, is separate to the living area. So we are obviously in the main habitation area that we sit here, which is effectively a square, and from where I can see, I've got 2 seats opposite. There's obviously 2 seats here. If my wife wasn't sitting there, there's at least 1 more seat there, and we've got 2 big comfy captain's chairs up front, and the kids that are remarkably quiet because they're currently on iPads are currently sitting on those captain's chairs. Now this means, this is the important point folks, that if you want to get up and cook some food, make a drink, whatever it is you want to do, you can do that without moving anybody else. You're in a completely separate area, and it's just so much easier. It's so much more natural.
Yes.
A bit more like being at home. So it's definitely something to consider. When I've watched other people's videos using their camper vans, and this is not a criticism, and there are many good videos out there that do show the negatives and the positives, but if I ever watch a video and it kind of suggests, is that saying it?
An hour.
It should still be running then, shouldn't it?
Yeah, the dots are still moving.
That's okay. But if I'm ever watching a video where they're showing what they're doing and you look and it just looks all nice and so relaxed, it's not quite like that, or it certainly wasn't quite like that for us, because of course there was 2 adults and 2 children. We knew before we bought the camper van, of course, that we had 2 adults and 2 children, but we wanted to give it a go.
Yeah.
You could say it was an expensive mistake, but I don't regret having the camper van. We loved the camper van. I would always recommend the camper van. It really is down to what your personal needs are. But for us, we're hoping that the space and the seating that we have in here and the separate bathroom proves to be the right decision for us. That good? Nearly there. Storage is the next thing. Now, in fairness to the Camper King van, albeit relatively small, there's a lot of cubby holes.
Oh, yes.
Lots of decent quality cupboards with the push button locks that you see on so many camper vans. And there's a very handy storage under that uncomfortable rock and roll bed. And the good thing, joking aside, about the storage under the rock and roll bed was, no matter what you threw in there, you could still operate the seat and bed without taking anything out. And that's quite important. It really would have annoyed me if you could use all that storage space but then have to move it to make it a bed. You could turn it into a bed without touching anything in that storage, and that was good. That was a positive. Now, in the motorhome, depending on what size motorhome you go for, of course, you get what's called a garage. Now, because we chose to have the bed in the habitation area at the front, just behind the captain's seats, that limits the garage space that we have, because what we enjoy, of course, is a decent sized bathroom. But what I would say to you is, and the way we looked at it is a lot of motorhomes with the bed at the back of the vehicle have obviously a garage that runs horizontally underneath that bed. And that's very useful, and it's quite a decent space, obviously depending on the size of the vehicle. I would say what we think with our motorhome is, if you look at that storage that's horizontal, ours is basically just vertical instead. It's at the end of the bathroom area. It's a little bit less space than you'd get if it was underneath a bed. However, because you can put shelves down to sort of section off each part, I would say it allows you to store stuff, and it's easier then to get it, because you might have something buried in the middle of the garage on a motorhome with a horizontal storage or a horizontal garage space, and you've got to fight through stuff to get to it, whereas everything that we've got is visible when you open the garage door. And it's also accessible from the bathroom area.
Yes, so you don't have to go outside to get it.
So you don't have to go out in the wet to get it. I personally think that's a neat touch. And as I said earlier, it's even ventilated, because there's ventilation everywhere in this van. So we think even with a 6-metre motorhome that storage is better.
Yes.
Even though they did miss the opportunity to put storage lockers under the elevating bed, which I know some manufacturers do. But we're still hopeful that there's enough storage, even though there's 2 adults and 2 children.
Yeah.
So I think we did 10 things that we loved about the camper van. I say I think, but we've got it written down. And I believe we've done 9 positives for the motorhome. So by my Birmingham mathematics, that means technically we should be talking to you now in our camper van.
Yeah.
Because we found more positives with the camper van than the motorhome.
And that's why we went with the camper van to start with.
Yeah, we certainly did.
Because we went through a list of things that we wanted from our lifestyle, and we thought camper van would be it.
We did. We didn't spend all that money just for fun.
No.
But we don't regret it either.
Oh God, no.
But what I would say is the obvious, really, folks. Everyone has different needs, different budgets. For us, all I can ask is that you follow us on our journey, and you'll get to see whether or not our decision to go from a camper van to a motorhome was the right decision, and or the fact that we went for only a 6-metre motorhome. We could have had a 7-metre plus motorhome. I am old, so I am allowed to drive a vehicle that's above 3,500 kilos without needing a C1 licence. In the UK, you need a C1 licence from, I think, the 1st of January 1997. I might have that wrong, but I will put that under the video just about there to confirm. I think it's 1997. But anyway, I could drive any size vehicle. Ironically, my wife wouldn't be able to. So if Fran ever wanted to drive one above 3,500 kilos, then Fran would need to take that C1 driving test.
Absolutely.
I don't need to, but anyway, we don't need to because it's under 3,500 kilos. It is down to personal preference. It is down to how much money you want to spend on that vehicle. As we said at the beginning of the video, I can find a camper van quite easily for £10,000. I can find a motorhome quite easily for £10,000. It depends what you want out of that vehicle and the budget that you're working with. Folks, as always, we genuinely hope you found that useful. Why not follow us on our journey and see the mistakes that we make, in the hope that therefore you don't need to make them. We're offering to make them for you. We're not trying to make too many mistakes.
Oh, we always make it look hard. Come on.
Yeah, we do make it look hard. If you did like the video, please remember to give it a thumbs up. Now, my wife normally at this point waves anywhere around the screen to look for a link at the end of the video to subscribe. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. It does show your support to the channel and it helps us to grow the channel. Thank you for watching. Now, before you go, folks, we set a challenge. What is this thing that I ended up paying £6 for because I mislaid the one that came with a bag of bits with our van? I'll go and show you. And we got new carpet. If anyone hasn't watched our video, we had a carpet fitted the other day. And like any new carpet, I always think it's like when you start at school, if you can remember when you was at school, and you had that new exercise book, and on the first page or two you wrote really neat, and then you got scruffy then on. I'm thinking the carpet's going to be the same. So, what is that thing that I had to pay £6 for? You going to wave, kids? Oliver? Too busy on their iPads. It was, are you ready, folks? The chassis plate cover.
Dun, dun. Yeah.
If you guessed that correctly, folks, there's no prize. I'm really sorry. But I was quite gutted that I managed to lose the one that did come with the van. But if you saw the amount of stuff that came in a bag with the van, there's no excuse actually, is it? I lost it and I had to pay £6 for it. Thank you for watching. See you on the next video.